Do you want to build big titties? Okay. My mother and father didn't bless me with the greatest genetics, so everything you're about to hear is down to extensive research and personal anecdote of how I grew my chest and how I grow clients' chests. A half scuba locked on, which does feature, it's basically a nootropic, but it does feature 50 megs of caffeine, so I'll get some caffeine benefits. Probably no more so than a Pepsi Max typically. Pepsi Max has caffeine in it, by the way. If you have that before bed and wonder why sleep quality is pretty poor, take out your Pepsi Max and have Sprite. There is today's content. I also have 2 scoops of pump, because who doesn't like the pump with more titty pump? That's it. And also we have 5 grams of creatine, and we also have 1.5 grams of electrolytes, because when we sweat we need to replenish it with electrolytes, so that's what that is. And then intra workout we have the GOAT Lucozade, guava to be is it guava? I don't think it is guava. I think it's apple and raspberry. Very nice. I don't know why, but I've been really into, or I've got back into kind of the UK grime scene. Now, when I was a kid growing up, I thought I was a right little gangster, but in actual fact I was a little shit. But basically what I did was go from kind of the Mobb Deep era, Wu-Tang-ish era, maybe like Tupac, like Biggie evidently, and then I went to I left that hip hop scene, and then I went to UK grime, and then I had like your Wileys, your Skeptors, your Kanos, your Gets, P Money, etc. And then I left that scene, and then I haven't really looked back since. I don't like the new age of grime, but I'm going back to the 09, 07 grime, like Dizzy Rascal as well. I don't know why, but that's the phase of music I'm in.
Yeah, 6 feet under.
I'll leave that there because I'll get copyrighted. So when we talk about pec hypertrophy, we really need to talk about a couple of things. Number one, we are evidently talking about we need to be progressively overloading in the gym, and that goes with any real movement. We need to be progressively overloading in the gym, and we need to be recovering very, very well. We also need rep ranges to be in a rep range of 5 to 30, so within that bandwidth we're completely fine. I do think with a big heavy compound we need to be kind of getting below 15. That would be great, but in any case we will be covered. Now when we talk about the bench press and what movements to maybe select for to grow a bigger chest, I do really recommend having something like a bench press in place. We have a paper by Ogasawa, which basically had a bench as a primary movement for the whole program, and basically showed that we had increased pec size, increased tricep size, and interestingly enough, increased bicep size. So I do think the bench press overall is a massive it's a really stimulative movement, has a massive raw stimulus magnitude, and it has at some level, unless you're very advanced, I do think it has a great SFR. Now if you are very advanced, I would suggest pre-fatiguing this movement, but if you are not, if you are someone who is a beginner, someone who is intermediate, I would highly suggest doing this at the start of your workout when you are relatively fresh. because of just due to the fact of how stimulative this movement is, and maybe how fatiguing it is as well. Now you need to pick movements that are evidently going to cause you no pain. So if a bench press does cause you any pain of any sort, it's evidently not a good movement for you. So that's another consideration. We need to pick movements that are very, very stable as well for the chest. Now, and that goes with any movement, any real kind of muscle group here. We need to pick movements that are stable. So for example, if I was doing this movement and I wasn't braced or stable, I would be leaking energy. So if my scapula wasn't dug into the pad, which it is, and my kind of glutes pressed down, which they are, and my kind of foot position is on the floor, which they are, if they aren't like this, we're going to be losing kind of a lot of power. We're going to be leaking kind of energy. So we need to be braced as well. We need to be adequately braced. So when we talk about stability as well, this is the reason why I won't necessarily go for a dumbbell variation. I would always go for a Smith or kind of a barbell. And the reason being is with a dumbbell, if I'm kind of lopsided, which I am, my left side is a lot stronger than my right side, then evidently like I'm going to be fighting with other muscle groups to try and keep it balanced. And obviously I just want my tension in my pecs. Now when we talk about, again, which movements to select, I do think that adding an incline would be great. I do think that having a flat bench is fantastic. I also think an incline is arguably better, but having both in is absolutely fine. We have a study by Arthur A. Trebs basically showing EMG data was greater at a 44-degree incline relative to a flat bench or a decline bench. So I would think that that's two movements straight off the bat that I would really involve into your programming. Now we can add the fact that I basically just said that maybe a decline isn't as great because of the stability side of it, and obviously a Smith might be a little bit better because we can just unrack and then just go. But we actually have a study kind of dismissing this. However, I'll basically state why I think this study could be done a little bit better, and I think that maybe the results could be in favor of a Smith. But basically we have a study regarding, or by Evan E. Sheck, basically regarding a Smith versus free weights, and basically the free weights won kind of hands down. Now I do think if the study was done via 1 rep maxes, I do think if the study was done via kind of rep ranges maybe like up to 15, maybe kind of 5 to 15, I do think that the EMG data would be relatively similar. I actually think the Smith would actually be a little bit better because again, you could be more stable. You can just get on the Smith and then just kind of press away rather than having to fight the whole way with other muscle groups like the core and kind of maybe your lumbar. I do think that involving kind of iso holds at the back end of the mesocycle could be good as well. I do think that you could do this via a pec deck. I do think that you can do this via a kind of maybe a Smith kind of press, pending you've got a spotter. So if you do like an iso hold, which is basically holding it at the bottom kind of range of motion, I do think that having a spotter just to clip it on would be completely fine. This is we have a study by Brad Schoenfeld basically determining that mechanical tension is the key driver of hypertrophy, and just adding in an iso hold would increase the mechanical tension. I do think that these are very fatiguing, so again, the reason why I would add it in at the back end of the mesocycle would be because of that. We can just mop up fatigue after that. I don't think adding in a kind of a decline press would be that beneficial, again for the same reason, the stability side of things. I don't think a decline bench is that stable, but yeah, they're typically the 3 movements that I would really try and implement into your programming. I would implement a flat bench variation of some sort, I would implement an incline variation of some sort, and I would implement a fly variation of some sort, all in a rep range of 5 to 30 or in that bandwidth. And that's how to grow a big ass chest. Bit of a weird thing. I'm not sure why I bought them, but hey ho. For post-workout meal, we had sirloin steak, we had rice, and we had asparagus. Now, the only thing that really changes between my massing phase and my kind of a fat loss phase or a prep would be my carbohydrate source post-workout or maybe pre-workout. I get on really well in an off season with rice, just very easy to digest. And in a fat loss phase, I tend to have like white potato, just because it's very satiating. In the satiety index, we know that white potato is one of the most satiating carbohydrates we can get. So obviously in a fat loss phase, when you're very hungry, we just pull out the big guns. That is white potato. Very nice. Join me in the other room and I'm going to speak about how to grow a big chest, or a more in-depth discussion and practical takeaway on how to build a big chest. See you there. You can come with me. Okay, so some practical takeaways from this vlog. We're back to the swizzle chair. I think you love swizzle chairs. Anyway, so practical takeaways we can take away from this vlog. So, to grow our chest, ideally we want machines, machine work, Smith work, barbell work, and dumbbells. Ideally, we want volume to be kind of 20 sets max per week. But ideally, I'd have you starting at 8 sets per week. There you go. So you've already got this. Again, when we can talk about dumbbells, I'm mainly speaking about, are you stable enough to do dumbbell or to have dumbbells in your hand? Is one side weaker than the other? If it is, then I would mainly prefer a machine or Smith, and then maybe a barbell, and then maybe dumbbells last. But if you are very competent, if you are intermediate/advanced lifter, then dumbbell away. But again, there is a point of, you are very strong here, so getting it off the rack is going to cause a lot of fatigue. Something to consider for sure. When we're talking about the kind of volume and the volume distribution, ideally you want 3/4 to be 3/4 of this volume is going to be through pressing, and a quarter is going to be isolation work in the form of like a cable fly or a fly in general. And then we have rep ranges. So ideally the rep ranges, 3/4 of this via pressing is going to be below 15 and above 6, and then we have our kind of fly movements, we want to be over 15, so a quarter of our volume is going to be in a 15+ rep range, kind of isolated work. You want to be in an intensity of 0 to 4 reps in reserve. So we have a very common misconception about kind of the reps in reserve thing, and I'll go over it very briefly. But 4 RER is going to be very hard. So when we talk about, maybe we'll just talk about pressing. When we talk about pressing, to gauge 4 RER is very easy. When you notice the bar path slow down, there tends to be around 4 RER. So when you notice the tempo just slow a little bit, 4 RER, one past that, 3 RER, one past that, 2 RER, another one past that, 1. When you feel like you're going to die, that's 0 reps in reserve. So yeah. In a recent study by Colby Sosa, we basically see that we are very good at gauging our reps in reserve, contrary to the big kind of downfall of reps in reserve. People who train to failure would always say, reps in reserve, you don't know how many kind of you're training, or you don't know how many reps in reserve you're training. Actually, we have an actual study suggesting that we are actually pretty damn good at guessing our RER. So yeah, that's definitely not an argument against the reps in reserve scheme. And even if we were, if we're progressing kind of week on week, so if we're beating the logbook, say if we're working with 4 reps in reserve, if we're consistently adding more weight or consistently adding a rep throughout the mesocycle, then understand that you're going to be working closer and closer to failure. If you're working at guesstimated kind of 7 RER and you add a rep throughout the mesocycle, understand that you're going to eventually reach your designated RER. Something to consider. And then I put iso holds at the end of the mesocycle. I wouldn't necessarily have it during your mesocycle, much the same as maybe I wouldn't go kind of 0 RER the whole way throughout the mesocycle. We're not really thinking about the next session and how it's really impacting the next session, especially like kind of central nervous system wise. So I actually would recommend iso holds due to the kind of practice that we have with kind of Brad Schoenfeld's study on mechanical tension. But I do think at some level, if you're consistently doing it, I do think that we're going to have a lot of muscle damage there, and it's going to have a kind of cross transfer to the next session. So if you do it on, say, push, if you have a push-pull leg split, if you do it on push kind of A, you may be very, very sore for the kind of push B, etc, etc. So at least this way, if you do introduce iso holds at the back end of the mesocycle, you're adding in a progressive tool. By having an iso hold, you're adding in a kind of mechanical tension element here. But if you go so far, then you've got the deload to eventually mop it up. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how to grow big titties.